So let me give you this numerical example to explain what happened to the diagram there. Alright, think about if there is no intervention, there is no price limit, no price ceiling in the market, then what would be the social welfare? Or we may call it the total surplus. What would be the social welfare here? The equilibrium would be 70, right? And the quantity traded would be 7. The value from the consumer would be 130 plus 120 plus 110, 100 plus 90 plus 80 plus 70. The value side minus the cost side, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, and 70, right? So in sum, it will be right? Is that right? Should be correct. So this is the ideal case, ideal scenario. And what about if there is a price ceiling at 40, and let's assume the first 4 consumers got the item, then the social welfare would become 120, 100, 220, 80, 300, 360. So the deadweight loss would be 60, right? This is the best case on one extreme. To the other end, to the other extreme, if we just make an assumption that it's these 4 people get the item, then the value would be 70, 60, 50, 40. Here would be 220, and the cost would be 100. So the total surplus, the social welfare, would drop to 120, and the deadweight loss would be negative 300. The deadweight loss would be 300, right? So the best case 60 deadweight loss, 300 of deadweight loss. The worst, the best, the worst. They are on the 2 ends, right? So if in the middle, if this one, this one, this one, and this one, if they got the item, then the total value of them would be 180, 240, 280, right? It will be 280, and the drop would be 140, which is the deadweight loss, just in the middle. So understand what I'm talking? And totally, for these 4 sellers, how much do they receive in sum? For each item is $40, and 4 items, it should be $160. This is the total revenue by the seller, and also the total expenditure by the consumer, no matter who are they. Okay? No matter who are the lucky ones obtaining the items, they pay 160 in sum, and they receive 160 in sum. Okay? Any other questions? So if they are the lucky ones, then the consumer surplus would be this much, and then there were loss. And if they are the lucky ones, okay, remember it's 4 and it's 4, right? The width, it would be the same. Okay? Once again, what's your question? 4 items, and each, the price for each would be 40, because 40 is the price ceiling. Okay? So this one received $40, $40, $40, $40. So totally 160. All right, so the width here are the same. And you may just remove this triangle to here. So the consumer surplus can be shrunk from this much to this. And this part would be sum, would be a part, should be added into the there were loss, if they are the lucky ones obtaining the items. Okay? Any other questions? All right. Now let's have a look at the price floor. Effective price floor. This is the price floor. And the example is about the minimum wage. So now, without any limit on the price, the equilibrium should be here. And this is the equilibrium wage rates or price, the equilibrium quantity or labor, workers hired. And now the government says that, all right, the wage you pay to the workers cannot fall below this limit. That is the reason why we call it a floor, right? So we cannot go below the floor. And if this is the price floor here, now the wage, the minimum wage here. So how many employer want to hire workers? They are labor demand side, right? The firms wanna hire workers, so they constitute the demand curve, and only these firms are willing to hire at this price, at this wage rate level. Okay? So demand, how many workers wanna get a job? This many, right? So the quantity supplied, the quantity demanded, there is a gap between these two. And now the supply exceeds, the quantity supplied exceeds the quantity demanded. We call this as a surplus. And in a labor market, it is an unemployment. This would be the unemployment. Okay? Unemployment. Oops. And we may also make an analysis about the welfare. Demand, supply, price floor, quantity demanded, supplied, quantity demanded. So it's excess supply, or we call it surplus. And this surplus would be unemployment in the labor market. All right, so these people are the ones who are willing to buy at this high price, right? They are willing to buy. And how many sellers are willing to sell at P under bar? It will be this many, right? And who will be the lucky ones get the job or get the item? Who are they? All of them are qualified to sell the item, to sell their labor. Okay? But only a few people, only this many people want to buy it. So many people want to sell it, but not that many people want to buy it. And in the best case would be these people who got the chance, who got the opportunity to sell it. And what about the consumer surplus? This is the value, and this is the expenditure, right? Because now, per unit, the price would be P under bar. So this is the expenditure, the value minus the expenditure, then this part would be consumer surplus. And this is the expenditure from the demand side, just equal the revenue of the supply side, right? The buyers pay this much, and which would be received the revenue by the sellers and their cost. So after deducted their cost, this part would be producer surplus. And the social welfare, the total surplus, would be this. The value minus the cost. Okay? And this is the deadweight loss. And this is actually the best case. The best case, which means the deadweight loss is the least one, the smallest. Since we cannot guarantee is these people got the chance, got the privilege, got the opportunity to sell their items. It can be these people, right? What about if the items sold by these people, these sellers who are having the highest cost? Then the deadweight loss would increase, would enlarge, right? So understand what I'm talking about? So it's always, if we want to compute the social welfare using the value minus the cost. So if you using this cost, you may do something like this. Parallel shift. So the total surplus may shrink from this much to this small part. And the deadweight loss would be this part, would be this, plus this. Okay? So the key points to understand what the social welfare is, just think about the story of my goods, oh my goods, 老天鹅, remember that? So, if they are the ones who buy the items, and they are the ones who sell the items, then the goods, the oh my goods, just give them money and take cost, receive some money from them. Okay? And if they are the lucky ones, because all these people are competing to sell their product, their items, to the limited number of buyers, right? All of them wanna sell their items so that they can make money, right? If you don't trade with someone, you make nothing. But if you got the opportunity to trade, then you may earn some money. So all of them have the incentive to make a trade, to trade with buyers. So they fight for the opportunity to do that. And in most textbooks, we have only the typical case for the best one. In most textbooks, they just the authors just tell us about the best case. This is the were loss for the best case, right? And for the worst case, if these people, so the amount would be the same, right? So we shift to here, shift this part to here, and this would be the total surplus, or the social welfare. And as compared with this one, you will see that the weight loss would be this much, right? So the surplus would be reduces by this amount, and that would be attributed to the weight loss part. Alright, so this would be the last slide for chapter 2 of chapter 2. And the last question is when to use the supply and demand model. This model is appropriate in markets. What kind of market? Perfectly competitive market. So a large number of buyers and sellers, all firms produce identical products. All market participants have full information about prices and product characteristics, and transaction costs are negligible. And firms can easily enter or exit the market. So, of course, there are some markets which are not perfectly competitive. So we will talk more about perfect competitive in chapter 8, and in somewhere chapter 9 we will talk about monopoly, duopoly, oligopoly. So the market structure is just like a spectrum defined by the number of sellers. So if there is only one seller, we call it monopoly. If there are two sellers, we call it duopoly. If it is a large number of sellers, we call it perfectly competitive. And if it falls between here, we have something like oligopoly. Oligopoly, right? And if the quality, if the product is not perfectly identical, if there are some differentiation on the quality, then we have something like a monopolistic competitive. Monopolistic competitive. We call it sorry. So for the market structure, we may have monopoly, duopoly, oligopoly, monopolistic competitive, perfectly competitive. So the demand-supply model is appropriate in this type of market. Okay? And actually, although it's a theoretical one, because you may see the conditions here are quite ideal. Large number of buyers, sellers, identical products, full information, no transaction cost, easy to enter or exit the market. So all of these conditions are quite ideal. However, it's a good one to capture most cases in the world. So the demand-supply model is actually quite good to capture some main features or some main characteristics, some key points in the world. And the case, monopoly, duopoly, oligopoly, is actually, the cases are not that many as we imagine. Actually, no. In most cases, competitive market prevails. Okay. Let's go to chapter 3. All right, after talking about the demand-supply behavior, just superficially, we want to go deeper into the demand behavior, which we call it consumer theory. So in consumer theory, what we want to know, how the demand curve be constituted, how we get the demand curve. So we will introduce something about preferences, utility, and budget constraint. So under budget constraint, we wanted to maximize our utility so that we have constrained consumer choices. And this part, 3.5, I will not talk about it. I will leave it to later part, maybe next semester, to talk about behavioral economics. All right, now let's have a look at the first one, premises of the model. Individuals, you and I, we are individuals. And individual tastes or preferences, you got your taste or you got your preference, I got mine. So you may love to eat something like apple, but I don't, maybe. And if I like something like carrot, you may not like the taste or the flavor, all right? For example, how many of you would like to, you love Haagen-Dazs ice cream? If you like Haagen-Dazs ice cream, just raise your hand. So you hate Haagen-Dazs, raise your hand. No one hates Haagen-Dazs. So do you like lobster? Do you know lobster? 龙虾 lobster. How many of you like lobster? You hate lobster. No one hates lobster. Oyster. 牡蛎 oyster. 生蚝. If you love oyster, raise your hand. You hate oyster. I hate. I hate oyster. So I don't eat 蚵仔煎. I always say 蚵仔煎, no 蚵仔, please, just 蛋. So 蚵仔煎 without 蚵仔, okay? And it's about our tastes or our preference. So the taste or preferences determine the amount of pleasure, we derive from the goods. So if some of you eat oyster, you will say, wow, it's so good, you feel so nice. And I hate it. So for every oyster, I just, okay, so I got negative pleasure. So people derive from the good and services they consume. So our preferences or our taste decides how much pleasure we got. And consumers face constraints or limits. We have income constraint, right? So you are not a millionaire, and we are not a millionaire. So even millionaires have budget constraints. They cannot buy anything like a star trip, star tourist. They may, some of them may have that much money to buy a starship to do something, okay? To have a trip to the Mars. Consumers maximize their well-being or pleasure from consumptions. Subject means you have to obey, you have to follow the budget and other constraints they face. So constraints not only about money, only about how much money we have in our pocket. We may buy this or buy that. We always have to consider, oh, I got this money, like for every month, I got like $10,000, and okay, so my choices are limited. I cannot buy too many items or too expensive items. And not only money, but also something like our energy. So also about the time. For all of us, we have 24 hours in one day, right? None of us have like 48 hours in one day. So we have the same time limit. And we need time to consume things, items. Like if we want to see a movie, you have to use like 2 hours or more, a little bit more than 2 hours, right? If you want to watch a baseball game to the stadium, you want to see 乐天啦啦队, right? You have to not only to pay for the ticket, but also you have to spend your time. So not only money, but also your time and also your energy. So all of that, all of